Chen Kaiger's films included complex symbolism, deep, rich, saturated colors, and deeply emotional acting and performances. The fifth generation explores the small, minute parts of communism with these politically expressed films. The communist policy had tried everything in their power to censor or ban films that revealed the seemingly unsettling truth about the Chinese government. Fortunately, with international attention, these films have survived, as well as fifth generation directors like Chen who continue to create these masterful works. Farewell, My Concubine follows the tragic love story of Yi or Douzi, who plays a traditional Chinese female role of the Dan in Peking opera. The viewer follows and discovers Yi's abusive life within the opera school, as well as the unrest of his abusive patrons. His relationship between himself and Xiaolou or Shitou, all within the background of the Chinese government's political turmoil during the Sino-Japanese War and the Cultural Revolution. Farewell, My Concubine may be one of the best and most respected films Chen has directed. Although banned in China, the international spotlight has highlighted Chinese history. This film encapsulates the modern history of China. Chen expresses this by following in the experience of these two opera singers. This incredibly ambitious film was able to win awards overseas. Let's see how this landmark film has brought a movement of the fifth generation, and how Chen obtained international attention on China's real history. The focus of this essay will be centered around Chen's use of visual representation by using colors, technical camera angles, movements, environmental space, and how all these represent the perspective and subliminal messages of the Chinese government's effects on the people of China. In order to get a sense of Chen's style, we have to understand the historical effects and significance of the fifth generation. Also consider the fifth filmmaking movement. These newly graduated Chinese film students had helped pioneer a cinematic revolution. Within these films, there are hidden psychological stories of the Communist Party. In 1967, the Cultural Revolution was implemented to help establish communism by removing capitalistic elements within Chinese society. The banning of Beijing opera allowed the government to implement communist ideals, while beating and imprisoning art performers. During the 90s, China attempted to control the country's catastrophic events after the massacre of Tiananmen Square protests in 1989. The government needed to assure and restore leadership while re-establishing the governmental role during the Cultural Revolution. Farewell, My Concubine shows the devastation of the art world and also highlights the suffering of the Cultural Revolution in Chinese society. Chen Kaige, a Beijing citizen, grew up with China's fifth-generation filmmakers. Chen graduated from the Beijing Film Academy, going on to make some of the most culturally revolutionized films. Working with one of his classmates, Zhang Yimou, Chen worked at Guangxi Film Studio, where he had made his first film, Yellow Earth. As a fifth-generation filmmaker, this film was not only visually stunning, but had exceptional storytelling that reflected China's social and political image. Chen's film style is a political one, due to his personal aesthetic expression. Typical of a fifth-generation director, heavy saturated colors and high choreographed action scenes are evident within his work. Chen's style also includes the influence of the Communist Party and the hardships many common Chinese citizens face. Chen incorporates complex relationships between politics, culture, and morals that are presented in the past, present, and future. He also includes controversial political agendas and colorful visuals by also including positive and negative space within his films. A really important thing to note about Chen's style of filmmaking is inconspicuously criticizing the Chinese government and their censorship. Most of his films emphasizes on the drama of everyday life with political issues that support and in conjunction with the drive of the film's story presented on screen. As part of the fifth generation of filmmakers, Chen's contempt for their government and the desire to obtain the revolution of culture. During the starting credits of the film, Chen chooses to give a short description of the actual opera, which helps give the audience expectations of what to come. The colors in the introduction scene includes the saturated colors of red, black, and blues that will be incorporated throughout the rest of the film. This film shows the representation of the characters on screen by using colors as symbolism to reflect the love, loss, and betrayal of the characters portrayed and the feelings of Chen and the people of China. The colors are also used to represent the psychological state of our characters and the change of historical events and traditional Chinese cultural representation. The black and white scene presented here represents the passing of time, an old era into the new, traditional to modern. Chen shows the liveliness of the people by having the camera follow the mother through the town square. Chen creates the environment of celebration, freedom, the freedom to sell, the freedom to perform on the streets is a sign of individual and artistic expression. Chen also makes the boy performers as the focal point, as it symbolizes the deep cultural roots the Chinese have with performers and the opera. This scene may be one of the only scenes that captures pure joy before the political revolts. The camera focuses towards the center, as the rest gather around in a circle, representing the personal connection Chen has with artistic performance. As the man begins to bully the local townsmen, chaos begins to erupt, but is settled once one of the boys smashes the brick on his head, symbolizing the huge impact performing arts does for the common people. The Beijing opera was used as an outlet, an escapism of the political world outside of the theater's walls, outside this circle. This scene shows Douzi, born with a sixth finger, is hastily pulled to the back of the school, where his mother severs off his finger and abandons him in the hands of an opera master. The audience is forced to sit with anticipation in silence and is then interrupted after the scream and sight of blood. This reflects the Chinese people as their normal lives are severed and thrown into governmental turmoil. It may also symbolize Chen wanting to sever the political ties and association with Chinese film censorship. The mood of Douzi's childhood is seen with unsaturated colors, with a grayer film around his character, which foreshadows his soon-to-be dark end, juxtaposed with the end of individual expression and the country's future. With the scene of the boys in school, it shows the difficulties of the performance within Peking opera. This also symbolizes the facade on stage, while concealing the reality of their labor-intensive endurance. This section of the film is also a direct reflection of the grooming of the Red Guard and the uprising of the Chinese regime. When this clip shows the boys surrounding the baby, this is a juxtaposition between Douzi and the abandoned baby, which symbolizes the fascination with the new and modern. It also symbolizes a younger generation of Red Guard members and foreshadows the baby growing up and becoming part of the uprising himself. As Douzi cries, this is essentially the end of his innocent childhood and will soon endure more hardship, as the struggle for power and command will affect his overall future. By looking directly into the eyes of the camera, he is acknowledging the troubles that lie ahead for all of the characters to the audience. This visually captures the reaction of most of the film, as the story will be completely affected by the occupation of Japanese soldiers as well as the Cultural Revolution. The following scene is Chen's way of expressing Douzi's final farewell to the innocent and naive virtue by capturing one last photo before the political upheaval that will change the lives of those on screen, as well as the common people of China during these events. The intercutting between Dieyi and Xiaolo are mostly shot through mirrors with mid-shots and close-ups. The given space of the scene is wide, almost like a personal set stage, for their characteristics and relationship between the two's moral values. These close-ups are used to make the audience focus on the roles of the opera. The mirrors are also there to mirror the similar aspects between traditional values that are of Dozi and its modern counterpart, representing Xiaolo's character. The space between them becomes even more narrow as their morals will soon clash. This parallels the cultural struggle of the introduction to communism. In this scene, red is the prominent color that shows the chaotic environment of the brothel, as well as the constant reminder of the Red Guard consuming the characters in the film, as Zhuxian is surrounded, reflecting the events that occur within the film affecting the lives of our characters. The camera shot of Zhuxian before jumping is slightly tilted up with a close-up of Zhuxian, creating a spectator's view of what she is planning to do. A cut of Zhuxian's point of view, then to Xiaolo, shows the temptation of falling for and accepting modernism. As Zhuxian leaps off the balcony, it symbolizes the desperation of trying to escape her world of reality. These drunk and out-of-sorts men continue to surround her, which gives the overwhelming feeling of the rules and censorship that many must live with without question. With the men hovering over Xiaolo, this is a foreshadow of the Red Guard's interrogation and the destruction of his career as well as the life of Zhuxian. Another thing to note is that Xiaolo does not stand up for Zhuxian, but instead distracts everyone by proposing. This is a link between his character and the connection between the ignoring of the cruelty of the Chinese regime. Xiaolo does not stand up for himself as a person either, but instead cowers away in silence. He also does this towards the end by stating that he never loved Zhuxian. The fear of death or humiliation was greater than his feelings for her. One very important scene is when Dozi performs at the hands of the Japanese soldiers. The highly bright and colorful theater has now turned dark, with a dull and murky atmosphere. The scene of the soldiers fighting symbolizes the chaotic unrest of political power in China. And when Zhuxian needs to be taken to the hospital, the way is blocked, which shows the overall power of any occupied form of government in China that the common people must endure. In this clip, Dozi is shown wearing more modern forms of Chinese clothing. Xiaolo's character represents the inevitable switch from the old traditional China to a modern one. This scene even shows Xiaolo begging Dozi to, quote, "Go with the times, I'll still be the king, and you my concubine." This is a great scene that depicts the challenges between keeping and preserving Chinese tradition, Dozi's dilemma, or continue to move into the modern communist country with more censorship and controlled forms of expression, which Xiaolo is ultimately saying in this scene. As Zhuxian and Xiaolo sit in almost complete silence, this is a representation of the final end to Peking opera, as the Chinese regime takes back power. They sit and watch as the last of their beliefs and values of the artistic performance is no more. When Dozi and Xiaolo sit next to Mr. Zhang, this shows the movement of age and the traditional way of life has gone. Each person in this clip are wearing darker shades of gray and black, as these colors symbolize psychological stress and unease. The outlandish traditional clothing Dozi and Xiaolo proudly wore before now wear almost expressionless clothing, showing the effects of China's struggle for power. One of the most important and symbolic scenes that represent the ultimate power of the Chinese regime and the fear implemented within their citizens is Xiaolo's interrogation scene. Xiaolo sees no one as a bright light shines directly in front of him, with a look of confusion and horror in his eyes. This symbolizes the fear and the confusion of the Chinese people as the Communist Party raged through the country. Chen chooses to use a direct spotlight in an empty gymnasium completely void of people. This symbolizes the Chinese government as being unheard, unseen. With this empty space, it also shows the government behind the scenes of everyone's life. No one can see them, but they are always watching. This is a very technical scene that shows the ambiguity presented to the people while hiding their true identity. We don't see their faces or actions, but they see ours. Through the course of the film, Dozi and Xiaolo have endured the historical events presented and have revolved their lives around opera. This is a direct representation of the endurance of the iron hand of Chinese power. The resilience of the Chinese people are resembled within Douzi and Xiaolou. The settings and visual design within the film shows the tremendous degree of both the spectacle and the preservation of Chinese traditions. Douzi and Xiaolou are forced to pledge loyalty and allegiance to the Red Guard in order to spare their lives. Xiaolou even ends up disowning Zhu Xian, and Douzi also humiliates her. The red all around in the scene is the symbol of the communist takeover, as well as showing the political shift into communist China. Chen Kaige focused on Peking opera because of the close relations between the roles of the theater and Chinese livelihood. Pharaoh My Concubine has a combination of socioeconomic, historical, and cultural context. Performing arts not only had an exceptional impact in public culture, but the Chinese opera was a gateway to express either the issues or bringing awareness within the political and social context. This film ties in Dieyi and Xiaolou as opera performers, experiencing the aspects of life in China's main historical events. This film not only reflected the changes of life and social society, but emphasizes the personal struggle of love, loss, and political upheaval. Chen is able to create vivid and colorful visuals that are contrasted with China's dark, contextual history. Chen also presents his image and perspective of the effects of Chinese history through the lives of these two characters and the challenges many people face during this time period, as well as the experiences of the fifth generation. He is able to present the unfolding of political events and the effects it has on their people. Chen's films are essentially a cultural prism of atmospheric and political revolutions that helped reflect his inner attitude to change political and cultural events for the better livelihood of its Chinese citizens. Thank you for listening.